a liar.
Yeah, I think we're going to begin.
Okay.
I think we're going to start this, aren't we? Are we going to make TV here? Rush Harp and Abbie Hoffman in the corner. It'll be the first time.
Yes.
The first time for anything. We going here? We're going to talk about the Reader's Digest, too.
Sure. You bet you.
That's what we're going to start with, I think.
Yes, yes.
Because that's important. Hello, I'm Paul Ellis, and this is Fast Talk. The moral majority's been out in front in the press for a long time in America, and long enough now to start having changes take place from within. And we have a guest here tonight to explain some of those changes and some of the workings of the moral majority and some of his own beliefs, the one Reverend Daniel Fore. Hi.
How are you doing?
I wanted to start with one of the things. We'll get back to the moral majority, but the first thing I really want to start with, you have been out in front lately talking about championing a cause of the Reader's Digest wants to write a condensed Bible. And that seems to be something you've been very active in. Would you like to talk about that a bit?
Yes, sure. You take the Reader's Digest basically is an apple and pie organization. It's a very family oriented type of a company. They have a tremendous credibility, not only here in the United States but throughout the world. They're highly received in the American public. So it would seem that if an organization such as this would begin to condense the Bible after condensing so many other versions of different works from other writers, that they would be the ones to do it, and it would be easily accepted by the public. But when you take the Bible and you begin to cut it out, for example, you take the major theological creeds, you take the basic 10 Commandments, you take the admonitions about divorce, you take the admonitions about sodomy, you take the admonitions about probably 150 admonitions about giving, about the resurrection, the virgin birth. When a man that does not have any real background in theology, or he's not illuminated by God the Holy Spirit, which part does he cut out?
Yeah, well, isn't it possible that a condensed Bible might get somebody to read the full version? That they might, might open it up to somebody who wouldn't have looked at it in the first
Well, it really
place?
doesn't make any difference. For example, if you take 800,000 words and you condense it to 500,000, you're cutting out 300,000 thoughts that were inspired by God. Now, if I give you a false manuscript and it doesn't have the truths that are necessary for the preservation of your soul, really what good is it going to do you?
Well, I get things handed to me or mailed to me that are just merely a quote from a little pamphlet, a quote from the Bible to get me to come to some sort of Bible study.
Okay,
it's
granted.
Not the same kind of thing.
Granted, but it's pure in its form. It has not been altered. They're talking about taking those excerpts and they're talking about changing and deleting them, taking words out, taking thoughts and changing them, actually condensing and censoring and making the Bible a form of literature that can be easily read by man. Now, the Bible happens to be a divine inspired document, and a man cannot read it nor understand it unless it's inspired.
Isn't that what Gutenberg did in the King James Bible? Put it into a form that man could read?
Not really. What he did is it was a translation, and there were many, many teams of translators that worked on it. And actually, if you read the original Greek or the original Hebrew, and you would correlate the English, there are some words in the Greek that would not be in the English, but the basic doctrine of preservation allows those thoughts to be there. Now, if I begin to chop out words and thoughts and basic doctrine from a Bible and condense it down almost 40%, it's impossible to maintain. For example, supposing Reader's Digest were given let's take a very bizarre example. Let's take the basic Bill of Rights. Let's take the Constitution, and let's condense it 40% and turn it over to Reader's Digest and let them reduce it and still preserve all the rights that we have. Now, is that possible? Well, that'd be a joke. So how much more foolish would it be if you were to take the actual Word of God that really bears the souls of men and try to
Who's
put it
gonna-
down.
Have they said who's going to do this? I mean, they are seriously considering this project, yes?
Well, I mean, they're not strongly considering it. They're in process right now. They've run marketing surveys. In fact, for some false advertising, they were sued for almost $2 million and granted a judgment against them for false advertising practices. They have one man who basically authored, in a single sense, the Revised Standard Version and deleted the truths from some of the better manuscripts. And now from that particular version, they're going to reduce it 40% more. And the motive is money, naturally, because you take the Revised Standard Version sold 30 million copies. They're looking to sell 50, 60 million copies at $14.98 a copy, and through direct mail. I mean, it's a tremendous profit motive, but what it's going to do, it'll make the Bible just like any other funny book. And it will destroy the credibility of the Bible, not only here, but I think throughout the world.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be back after a short message. Oh, is he up there? Okay, here we go. Welcome back. Our guest today is Reverend Daniel Fore, and I wanted to ask you, the big thing you've been involved with up till now is the moral majority, which is a brand of religion and politics, a religious ethic put into a political form. Yes, it's a lobbying group.
The moral majority is really basically what we call a C4 corporation. It's a political lobbying group, and every political lobbying group has the right under the state to lobby expressing a philosophical viewpoint. Now, the moral majority is nothing more than a political lobbying coalition, and they use the precepts of the Bible as a philosophy.
Yeah, but it seems they get a lot of press, a lot of airtime on the Christian ethic, putting out a Christian ethic to a country that's not supposed to be a Christian country.
Well, but see, that's really a false philosophy. If you go back and study historical values, you study history in America, our country was basically founded upon the Christian ethic. For example, Harvard University you used to have to read the Bible every day to be thrown out of Harvard University. It was named after a preacher. You take Columbia University, was one time committed to the gospel. Pennsylvania, if you study the heritage of America, everything we do, we're a nation under God. It's on our money. It's inscribed in the halls
Under
of Congress.
God, yes, but not under Jesus Christ as God.
Well,
it doesn't say in Jesus Christ we trust on our money.
Well, but you cannot, for example, eliminate the fact that there's probably 70 to 80 million people in America that do believe in Jesus Christ as being the Savior of the world, and they practice it and they preach it. Now, that is not to say that anybody else has to believe that. We do have the right to worship freely if we want to worship Jehovah, or if you want to worship Mohammed or some other God. In pluralism and under a free republic, we have the right to worship the God of our choice. Now, the whole thing about, say, trying to Christianize America is if we were to do that and censor everybody else's belief, we would censor our own. The moral majority was never organized to censor or to Christianize America. We were incorporated on three basic precepts. One, we registered people, we informed people, and then we tried to deliver the vote.
Right, and you delivered the vote to this last administration, and they, from what I can tell, have kind of abandoned the support.
Well,
they're not doing what they were supposed to do.
The moral majority, it's said that there's about 30% of the Roman Catholics that philosophically support the moral majority coalition. There's many Jewish people that support the moral majority coalition, but our present administration certainly has other lobbying groups beside the moral majority, and they cannot totally appease one group.
A couple of things have been appearing in the press lately that probably have interested you. One is prayer in schools. Jesse Helms, I believe it was Jesse Helms, said that show me one person who was hurt by prayer in school just recently and wants to put prayer back in school. I was growing up when they were taking prayer out of school.
Well, I tell you, I for example, went through most of my school life, and we did pray in school, and it was, I don't think it hurt me or affected me. I was on television with Madalyn Murray O'Hair, and we talked about this thing at great length, and she had a great part of this whole movement. I'd like to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Okay, in Congress, in a pluralistic government where we have the right to worship the God of our choice freely, we have Jewish congressmen, we have Mormon congressmen, we have Catholic congressmen, we have Protestant congressmen, we have atheists, we have agnostics. Every morning they open in prayer. And yet in the same schools, the sons and daughters of those in the same school, under the same government, and the same bureaucracy, it's wrong for them to do.
Well, I can answer the question Jesse Helm said very easily. When we were getting prayer in school, I'm Jewish, I prayed my prayer. Period ended, I got beat up. I mean, kids came out and slugged me. You can't.
Well,
Christmas songs, I did not participate in Christmas pageants. I didn't participate. I didn't believe that. And bango, I got into fights.
I don't know what school that you went to.
Just an average public school.
But I went to school all my life in California, and we didn't experience those things. For example, the other day, we were on a television program where people are against people caroling in the schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, well, what about the Christmas trees? I mean, you probably got 1,000 requisitions from people across the country, and the very epitome of the Christmas tree and the Star of David up on top is symbolic of the Christian ethic. So on one hand, I can take you to high schools all over the state of New York that embedded in the walls and marbles have got the scriptures of Christ, the scriptures of Isaiah.
But do they belong in the school?
Well,
I mean, in our
the
public schools?
I'm saying the fact is they're there.
Mm-hmm.
They're there. So if we're going to be consistent with what we're trying to do, I think we need to quit being stupid. We need to either we're going to take all of religion out of the school, and that includes atheism, that includes agnosticism, that includes Marxism, that includes all the other religions that are declared religions. For example, atheism is a religion.
Mm-hmm.
Agnosticism is a religion. And yet you can teach those damnable doctrines, but you can't teach a Bible doctrine.
Well, presently there's another monkey trial going on about creationism versus
I've
evolution.
often wondered about all the intellectuals that believe in all the evolutionary theories. What are they afraid of? There's 7 different theories of creation. Why not expose the child to the theory of creation? It's an intellectual exercise. He doesn't have to accept it. He can reject it. We expose them to atheism through evolutionary practices, but on the right hand, we deny them.
So you're asking for both to be taught?
Well, I think if you're going to be an intellectual and you're going to examine things and open the door to all different kinds of views, you can examine communism, you can examine Marxism, you can examine agnosticism, atheism, all the other doctrines in these so-called learning centers in all the colleges, and yet if you even think in terms of Christianity or religion or carry a Bible, people almost go off the wall. It's really a foolish type of intellectual thinking, in my opinion.
Question about born-again Christianity, born-again Christians. We're finding a lot of born-again Christians where people are up for parole, up for courts. Aren't people using that as a tool?
No, I think there's
I
think there's a large movement in the jails today. A born-again Christian does not necessarily mean that you happen to be somebody of tremendous character or that you didn't have any flaws. Christ came to save the sinner, and such was I. I'm still a sinner. But by the same token, Chuck Colston and many others, there's a large movement in the jails today where men are turning to God and they are becoming born again, and their lives are being reconciled.
You really believe that that's what's happening? It's not just a get right with God kind of trip?
I don't think there's any doubt. I think there's a lot of money in religion. I think there's a lot of shysters. But by the same token, and religious people who are in the public eye, they don't always do right, and some of them make mistakes. But you can't take the little that they do wrong and totally cast out all that they do right. Those that do malign the gospel and fill their coffers full of blood money, so to speak, God ultimately will judge them, and I think it always catches up with them.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break again, and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Reverend Fore, I want to ask you one real big question. The whole thing with the Christian movement, born-again Christian moral majority, is an evangelistic, seeking converts, almost to the point of snatching people's souls to join your ranks. Isn't that what this whole movement's about anyway?
Not at all. Not at all. For example, in the many meetings that I've preached, and I've preached, I suppose, hundreds. I've spoken at Columbia University, Vassar. I've been on television untold times. I've been in Jewish synagogues. I've met with the Roman Catholics. I have never been there to proselytize, and I've tried to respect those theological creeds.
Then what are you there
beliefs.
for if you're not there?
I am there in a theological sense that if we take one issue, say abortion, that I believe very strongly that biblically abortion is murder. Now that's my philosophical view, and I correlate my political applications with that belief. The Mormons believe it, the Roman Catholics believe it, and many of your Orthodox Jews believe it. So on that one point, theologically, we can unite.
Yeah, but shouldn't we just look for this is a country that's supposed to be a melting pot and accept a lot of people. From a government standpoint, shouldn't we look for something that, if abortion's legal, that doesn't mean you got to go out and get an abortion.
Well, but the point of it is,
if it's illegal, means you can't.
If we're all paying tax dollars, I was just reading coming in to the studio that there was a doctor that was treating a fetus inside the mother's womb. Now, if that's not life and it's not worthy of life, they were draining the brain inside. And so if it's not life until it comes from the mother's womb, then what's the point of trying to preserve that which is not legally declared as life? If you study the laws that are on the books here in the state of New York, you'll find out that it used to be, and there's still laws, that a fetus at a certain stage would have to have a legal funeral, and it had to have a legal death warrant signed by the doctor.
At what stage?
If it were aborted in any stage.
Well, my point is that it's you're taking a belief and making it a legal a law, a part of a government document.
Okay.
You're not making it.
Okay.
You're not leaving room for people, like you said. Atheism is a religion. You're not leaving room for that religion.
A recent court decision in considering consenting adults, sodomy was declared to be legal in the state of New York. Okay, there are millions and millions of people, probably 3/4 of the people in New York, do not believe that that is moral, and they certainly do not believe that it's illegal. It should be legal because it is contrary to their religion, and yet it is a law today, and we must abide by that. There are millions of people that do not want their tax dollars supporting state-funded or federal-funded.
Well, there were several million people during the Vietnam War who didn't want their tax dollars to go to Vietnam.
Okay. Well,
so they didn't pay taxes.
On the other spectrum, let's look and we always talk. You can't legalize morality, but isn't it amazing that we can legalize immorality? We've legalized drug abuse through alcoholism. We've legalized murder through abortion. We've legalized casino gambling, lotteries. We've legalized. We're even talking now about. We've legalized consenting sodomy, and all of those are contrary to the Bible. And now,
yeah, but the Bible is not the document that this country's based on. It's based on a Constitution. It's not based on the Bible.
Well,
it's based on the Bill of Rights.
I tell you what, the Bible philosophically is what has kept this country where she is at today. The influence of the gospel throughout this nation is why God has preserved our country. Those moral truths, if you take basically the Ten Commandments, and you take them straight down the line, the Roman Catholic community, the Jewish community, the Protestant community basically live by those creeds. And if you throw those out the window, you've got no country left.
Well, I'm not saying throw them out the window any more than I'm saying Christ said, love thy neighbor as thyself, and boiled it down to that. I'm not saying throw that out the window, but I'm saying, isn't that an individual decision for me? And shouldn't I make that decision to follow those rather than...
All right, let's get it back to political, and I can answer it.
Okay.
Okay. In the political arena, we are guaranteed free exercise, and we have the right to democratic process. Okay, I am a citizen. I am a member of a church. I'm a pastor of a church. I have the right to vote. I have the right to vote based upon my philosophical viewpoint of the way that I perceive the issues. And if you say that I can't do that because I believe in the Bible, then you're trying to censor me.
No, I'm not saying you can't vote based on your philosophical issues, but I'm also not saying that we should make your philosophical issues something that I have to deal with because it's a government.
And you're perfectly right from your point of view, but if all of us in a theological coalition or in a political coalition vote and it becomes law, then you have another access. You have the Supreme Court, who can evaluate that law to protect the freedoms of the minorities that don't believe in, say, the legislative process is controlled by the majority, if that's in fact the case. But the basic Bill of Rights in the First Amendment says this. It says that government shall make no law that restricts really religion or restricts you from worshiping and thinking, but it does not say that the church shall not be involved in government. It says the government shall not be involved in the church.
It's a one-way street. It's absolutely a one-way street.
It certainly is.
It was your own paper that I just read that in.
I am a pastor, I'm a father, I'm a citizen, I am a part of the church, and yet I have the right to political process.
My personal philosophy enters into every time I vote, enters into who I choose as a candidate, and everything else in my daily life. But I am not put to go against the government that makes
But you are, and I'll explain why. Did you know that the reason we have abortion today in our country is because the judges who are sitting on the bench do not look at life as being life until that baby happens to be born. If you had moralists that were sitting on the U.S. Supreme Court bench, they would look at life as beginning at conception, and there would not be abortion today. If you had judges that were moralists that were sitting on benches that believed that sodomy was wrong, philosophically, they would rule against it.
I would venture to say if you had women sitting on that board, that deciding board, we'd have had abortion legal long before. I would have said that women would have made that decision a long time ago, that it was up to their choice.
Everybody,
I said this before, you're denying a woman a right to communicate to God. It's between her and God. She has that privilege. The same as I have the privilege when I'm ordered to go to war to decide whether I want to kill or not, she has that same decision to make.
No, look, God nor society gives nobody the right to kill. Premeditated murder is an act of premeditation.
Put me in the Army and teach me to use an M16 for what?
Okay.
I'm not using it to brush my teeth.
No, wait a second. There's a basic difference. If you're defending your country, if you're defending your wife, if you're defending your home, if you're defending a way of life, if you're defending the right to be free, and you don't want to go under the bondage and the onslaught of, say, some godless butchers that are going to take our country over, then you're going to have to fight to defend that. And if you're called by your government and the higher power that calls you, you have a right to go in it. You can kill or be killed. But when a woman, because she doesn't want to biologically be bothered with the fetus that is inside of her, arbitrarily in a premeditated fashion says, I'll take this life. Supposing your mother would have decided to censor you just because she didn't want you. That's not a right. That's cold-blooded murder is what it is.
But I wouldn't have been here to make that. I mean, I wouldn't have been around to deal with that. It just would have been something that would have been done.
But the fact of it is, basic morals ordained by God preserved your life, and that's why you're breathing today.
I think the big concern is that abortions are going to go on anyway. They're going to happen. Legal, illegal, they're going to happen. And I think the concern was that they were illegal and killing people along with it. The illegal abortion, the time the abortions were illegal, there was a woman dying every day.
Abortion, for example, started basically for these three reasons. Okay, incest was one major reason. If that was going to become a problem, or say if a woman was going to be hurt biologically or if she happened to be raped, if you study and read a lot of the AMA data, for example, you'll find out that biologically it's almost impossible for a woman to have her life threatened or to be in jeopardy because she's raped. And I suggest to you that many people that are raped, they themselves, in fact, it's very hard, it would be very hard in my mind after being married 23 years to rape a woman. And I'm saying, now, if you look at incest and rape and biological impairment, is it worth 1.5 million babies being killed every year?
I don't know how hard it is to rape a woman. All you have to do is undo your fly. I mean, it's not that difficult to rape a woman.
What I'm talking about is 1.5 million young people that are thrown in trash cans, that are sitting there wreathing and kicking, and 24 hours later, doctors sit around a table determining whether they're going to kill those babies or not, and then we say, is that life? It's the most damnable, ungodly, bizarre crime committed in our country today, and we feel, and I still do today, that it will be the destruction of our country because God will judge us because of it.
Another thing that you the moral majority happens to have a
bear in mind, I'm not in the moral majority. I'm a pastor.
Right, you've
these
left.
views are my own.
Right, these are your own. You've left.
I had them before I came. I've got them today. And I'm not speaking for.
Homosexuals happens to be something that comes up a lot.
A homosexual is no different than an adulterer, a fornicator. The homosexual basically says, I was born this way, and I'm the way I am because I was created this way, which is ridiculous. Okay, the homosexual cannot blame society or birth for his problems. He's a homosexual because he chooses to be one, and because...
Well, can he have that choice? I mean, I could choose to be a doctor, a lawyer, or a homosexual. What's the difference?
Yes, he can. He can choose to be a homosexual if he wants to be a homosexual, but by the same token, that exhibitionism of flaunting and pushing his lifestyle upon others who do not count it as being moral, I don't think America's ever going to go for that. I frankly could not abide by it. I'm not against the homosexual. I know many. I've counseled them. Some of them I happen to like, but I think their lifestyle is damnable, and I think it's going to destroy them. It's going to send them to hell, to be quite honest.
Well, I think their lifestyle, what we see as the homosexual lifestyle, is the same lifestyle that's put on in America, with whether you're wearing Jordache jeans or whatever. I mean, we get all that all the time, but I think the basic concept of homosexuality is a choice. This is America. I mean, this is the land of choice and opportunity.
Look, supposing I started
you start doing what you want, we're not going to have any choices.
Supposing I started a movement that I decided that I wanted to start having sex with the dead or with the young people. I mean, with the 4-year-olds. In other words, if I started some sexual deviancy cults, for example, that allowed me to commit all kinds of bizarre acts because I make that legal and have a choice to do it, does not make it right. For example, we arrest the harlots on the street. We still take them in for pandering, and yet the males do the same thing, and they're to be exempt because we've changed and we've reclassified it. Now, you have to stop and think from God's point of view, and it's unnatural for a man to lay with another man because the human race would be extinct to begin with. He deifies, he denies the Creator, which is God, and he exalts the creature, which is himself. And I've been married 23 years, and I can't think of anything more revolting or more disgusting than a man laying with a man. I can't conceive that in my own mind. Now,
but just because you can't conceive it in your mind, nor could I possibly conceive it in my mind, but that doesn't mean that somebody else can't and shouldn't have the freedom to do that.
Look, if it is a law that homosexuality is illegal, like prostitution is illegal, or like it used to be a law that statutory rape, if a man laid with a 12 or 13-year-old girl, he could go to the pen. Now today it's wide open. We no longer have those laws. If the laws are on the books, the homosexual is going to have to abide by them, just like I have to abide by the abortion laws today. But I can work through legislative process to change the abortion laws and to work against the sodomy laws and to work against the laws. I have the right to political process under the basic Constitution and the basic Bill of Rights, and I cannot be denied that. Now the homosexual also, he can...
Hello, my name's Paul Ellis, and this is Fast Talk. We're back again with a Conversations with Abbie Hoffman. We're going to continue where we left off. You're presently working with drug addicts, counseling drug addicts. Do you actually counsel people? You do counseling?
Yeah, I do. I do counseling. I gain publicity for the program. I help them fundraise. I've worked on a TV commercial, design logo set. But I do counseling on a one-to-one basis, and I have a cultural development course, as well as taking these kids on field trips, newspapers, TV stations, let them see what's going on behind the magic that they see out there.
Okay, this is drugs. I know that we started this before. Yippie, the whole yippie thing, the culture of the Woodstock Nation was bent in had a lot of drugs going through it. Legalized this, and let's smoke pot. We had smoke-ins, be-ins, and smoke-ins and everything. It's almost ironic that you're doing drug counseling now, almost like...
I always did it. I mean, there's the problem with just about everyone, that has the party line, that works with addicts, is the inability to differentiate a clinical problem from a criminal problem. The society is ready to make it a criminal problem. I mean, it is. You just had to remember the moral majority is. Drugs come from the devil. And by the way, when we talk about drugs, we're only talking about the illegal drugs, aren't we?
Yeah, we're talking
recreational drugs. You're not talking.
Well,
you're not talking about the other 396,000 drugs Americans
use. Well, do you counsel people on the other 396,000?
People become addictive to lots of things. I'll tell you, abuse. If you need something to get up, if you need something else to get it up, if you need something else to go to the movie to make it a meaningful experience, if you need something to stop eating, if you need something to start eating, and then something to put you to sleep at night, well, you are in a dependent situation. You are abusing a subject, a substance, or a lot of substance.
Yeah,
that's a clinical problem, and you need help for that. If you are addicted, that means that your body has a need that your mind doesn't, in a certain sense. Addicts don't take any drugs to even get high. So if you have those problems, you have a clinical problem, you should be treated. Every one of the 400,000 drugs that I can think of can be abused. And it can be used by an addict.
But didn't the Woodstock Nation philosophy give a focus, a cultural focus to taking drugs? Didn't it say, I can be part of this nation if I take drugs? I wonder, a lot of people interpreted that.
I think what as the author of the book,
right, the author of the book,
as the author of the book, I think what we were saying was that there's a hypocrisy. We are involved at this particular moment in a cultural civil war. This is in the late 60s, early 70s. One particular culture.
Right.
Believes in imperialism, believes young people should go and die, it practices racism, whatever the symbols, whatever the practices of that culture are. It also believes that alcohol deserves to be legal, that cigarettes deserve to be legal, that it makes distinctions culturally, and that that another culture is going to be oppressed. In other words, if you kind of say, well, I'm not into those drugs, I'm into these drugs, well, if you're into these drugs, then you're an outlaw, and you can go to prison. So what we were for was for a consistency. I'm for a consistency, even more, I suppose, than a kind of legalization. I'm for truth and honesty, because the problem is that we do have a serious abuse problem. We do have a serious addiction problem. And you can't begin to look at the problem unless you start to get into examining certain kinds of truths, unless you drop the party line.
Well, when I was growing up...
I mean, pick up a newspaper. Yeah. Okay, we'll talk about here. I pick up the newspaper this morning. $10 million drug ring busted. Okay? Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know what it means to a poor black kid living in the ghetto. It sounds like somebody struck the lottery. $10 million. I mean, it has no relation to reality, to economics. A $10 million figure is picked out of the air. So why does the newspaper put it in quote? Oh, well, the police said it's $10 million. Where's it $10 million? I mean, it doesn't. It sounds like the drug dealers are out there making huge amounts of profits because they have these flashy cars and big suits, right? And they're in their 40s and they sneak around high schools. Yes, but you see, the typical drug dealer in this city is a 17-year-old poor kid. So why are we talking about reality? Okay. We're not talking about reality when we talk. What does it say over here?
Little reality. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. What does it say over here? Welcome back. We were talking about reality, and we were talking about...
addiction is a clinical problem that should be treated.
The thing that I keep seeing is that when I was a kid growing up...
There's nothing contradictory to what I'm saying now is what I said in the 60s.
Yeah, when I was growing up, drugs were considered... I mean, you were a drug addict, you were scum of the earth. I mean, we didn't even talk about it. Then in the
because
60s,
you're weak, you got into it on your own, and...
but in the 60s, you didn't get into it on your own. Your best friend turned you on to drugs. Your best friend, it was part of a whole cultural scene. And I think it's one of the things that's left of the cultural scene of that time, the hippies, yippies, is the drug addiction, the long hair and the fancy clothes, not the beliefs of anti-war or fair play or sharing this with somebody else. It's basically, how high can I get? Where can I play my guitar? And do you see any of that in the leftover?
I think
I almost feel that nothing good came out of it.
I think that it's such an emotional issue, drugs, and so fraught with lies, it's hard to even get to the point where you want to examine the different kinds of drugs that we used in the 60s as opposed to the 80s and how that reflects in terms of the general society, and get into examining those kinds of questions. We can't address that because of the emotionality and because of the kind of party line. But those are kind of interesting. Those are some interesting kind of questions.
You see a difference between the kind of drugs of the 60s that you talked about in the 60s, or other Timothy Leary, other people talked about, than what you're dealing with now in rehabilitating people. There's a different kind of drug, different kind of person.
I think there is a different. I think perhaps there were more of what I would call explorers then, people that were explorers rather than abusers and addicts. There were more soft drugs, and now there are more hard drugs. I think the scene has changed in that. I think there's a certain kind of ethic that goes along with hard drugs. For example, most addicts, whether they're from middle class or even wealthy families or poor families, are also crooks. They steal. So that goes, they steal from anybody. Steal from their mother, steal from their sisters.
We had someone on here not too long ago talking about the CIA.
It's hard finding addicts that have a revolutionary consciousness.
It's hard finding addicts of any consciousness, isn't it?
To put it.
Isn't it used as... We had a guy on here talking about the CIA bringing drugs into the country, using the CIA as a...
By definition, I suppose, addict means that a substance has control of you. So I would say that it's hard finding anyone that's in kind of control. That doesn't mean that, of course, people that use or explore drugs aren't in a certain amount of control.
We had someone on here talking about the fact that CIA was bringing drugs into the country, hard drugs for street sale.
That's well documented.
Well documented. Almost to me as if drugs are being used as another way to keep down, as another oppressive tool.
Those are very interesting questions that you're raising, and one that sensitive political people ought to be thinking about. If you buy heroin, you're supporting organized crime, you're supporting the CIA, you're supporting corrupt regimes in Southeast Asia. You snort coke today, the chances are 75% you're supporting a brutal, corrupt junta in Bolivia. Mm-hmm. Those are political realities that are connected with the drug scene, and for politically conscious people, it's reasons not to use them.
Is this something you would use in your rehabilitation? Do you bring this up in your conversations with the addicts? You're talking about cultural things that you do with them. Is that something you get into at all? It's a drug-free residential environment. Oh, it's a live-in environment.
Because the addict personality is one that has very little self-esteem, very little inner discipline. They think everything is a conspiracy arranged against them, that they are a complete victim of all these forces around the world. So what you try to do is to bring some self-esteem, some sense of confidence to individuals. That's what you do. You almost don't have to talk about the drugs. The drugs are an excuse for people to come in and discuss the situations of themselves and the family and the neighborhood with their peers.
Aren't they
those kinds of things?
But in some sense, aren't they really aren't they a victim of certain things? Isn't the drug addict kind of a victim?
We're all, in a philosophical sense, I suppose, victims. But these are people that the sense of being a victim becomes overpowering to a certain extent, so that it's very difficult to function in the society. So you have to restore a kind of sense of confidence where they feel they have power over their own judgments. These are clinical, these are therapeutic kind of problems. We could talk about that apart from drugs. That's the point I'm trying to make.
It's separate and apart from drugs. This is still a clinical thing, a problem beyond just the addiction. They're addicted for a reason, is what you're saying. There's something else in their character that's causing that. I guess, is that what you're saying? I'm not sure.
Yes, that they're personality problems that you have to deal with.
And change the subject a bit. Well, not really. You have a benefit coming up. Benefit for this Veritas. I just think we ought to mention that. It's when? January 18th?
Let me give you an example of what I mean. When I was upstate in prison, half the guys in the closed minimum security prison were addicts. Obviously, well, in this particular prison anyway, there was very little drug scene. The controls were very strong in the prison I was in. They can be in that prison a couple of years. They're not using drugs. They come out of the prison, the chances of them going back to drugs are very, very high. Why? Because there was nothing in the 2-year experience except withdrawal that dealt with the fact that they were addictive personalities, that developed a sense of inner esteem, that worked on their relationship to their peer
The average
groups,
person thinks
their
that's all it
sense of
takes.
themselves in a community. Do you understand a little bit more what I'm saying?
The average person, though, who sees whatever information we have about drug addicts thinks that withdrawal solves the problem.
Exactly. Take
Once
away
you-
the drugs and then the drug problem is solved. That's not, I doubt that's the way Alcoholics Anonymous works, or I doubt if it's going to be effective. I doubt Weight Watchers, you know, you can have food addictions. I doubt if it works just simply on the idea you just take away the food, you know, tell people food is bad, 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 and you do that for 6 weeks, and then they go back, you know, boom, they're going to balloon again in a minute. There has to be you have to address personality problems, you have to address the problems in society. You can't remove the problems of addiction in the inner cities of New York from the conditions of poverty, joblessness, racism. You can't remove them. To remove them is blind. That's why the whole thing is blind. You know, it's very disgusting. Nobody sits and looks at the reality of things. You know, we had 8 years of the harshest laws in the country, the Rockefeller laws. They were designed to eliminate heroin from the streets of New York. There's 20 times the amount of heroin today on the streets of New York as there was 9 years ago before the Rockefeller laws. There's probably 20 times the amount of heroin as there was in 1903 when it was legal. And I might add very popular, by the way. So you see, we're creating a kind of false situation. We're attacking it at the wrong end rather than addressing the roots of the problem. And it's creating an ostrich, you know, sticking its head. The reason I address myself to heroin as a particular problem is because half the street crime in New York City is related to heroin addiction.
We're going to take a quick break.
It becomes our problem. It's not just a question of an individual going in the corner and having the right to shoot up. It becomes society's problem.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
We keep coming up with the solution that's the wrong solution. Anybody's...
Welcome back. Our guest today is Abbie Hoffman, and I wanted to ask you, where do we go? You're coming up for parole soon. You're going to be through with this prison thing, and you won't have to do this drug thing by order. What are you going to do? What's your next step? You going to stay with this? You're going to go back to the environmental thing that you were doing in the underground when you were underground? What are you going to do? Do you have any plans?
I have basically the same political beliefs as I had 10 years ago, which were the same political instincts I had when I was 4. I don't particularly see the need to be born again and again and again. I'm going to continue to be an activist. I'm going to continue to organize people. I'm going to continue to communicate ideas
you were a community
that I think
organizer.
are going to lead to a better, more just society and world, and I'm going to just keep doing it.
You've called yourself a community
Over and
organizer a couple times in the interview, and in your book, soon-to-be a motion picture, you talk about being the community was just bigger during the war era. You ready to take on some of the bigger issues of today, or are you going to stay on a local level? I mean, we have some pretty...
I don't understand the language that you're using, but I'm stupid when it comes to language. So I don't understand
Vietnam was a world issue. Vietnam was a world issue.
Oh.
Drug addiction seems to be a city issue. It's a world issue, but it's been...
Every issue is going to be world. It's all going to be world. It's all going to affect us locally. It's a false dichotomy. It's like working within the system or without the system, outside the system. You might ask me that question. A lot of reporters do. It's another metaphysical question.
Outside the
Only double-strength Tylenol works within the system.
I'll ask you a metaphysical question.
It's not-
How about the fact in your book...
I'm going to continue to organize people so that the people will have more power than the institutions.
You say in your
I'm
book,
gonna
soon to be a motion picture, that the greatest high is to go against the power and win. go up against the powers that be and win. Isn't that basically metaphor
Not
for
exact.
life?
That is a very interesting misquote.
Okay.
I said it was for people who have no power.
To go right.
You see, I have no doubt that it's quite a high for the Dallas Cowboys to beat the Philadelphia Eagles.
Right.
But I am talking about kids in Harlem who got 20 times the chance of going to prison and ended up in a mental hospital as they do going to college. I'm talking about those kids, you see, to challenge the bankers and the real estate powers in this city. I'm talking about people who have no power. I'm talking about the farmers, the unemployed workers up in the St. Lawrence where I live, the small property owners, the small business people challenging the Army Corps of Engineers and the United States U.S. Steel Corporation.
But is that really a metaphor for life anyway? To stick by your beliefs, do what you see is right, and come out, do what you will, what you're supposed to be here for? Isn't that kind of whatever you're doing, shouldn't you do it with that kind of zeal, with that kind of challenge? You know, you're talking about. Are you talking literally going and fighting City Hall? You know.
Well, I'm talking about bringing power to the powerless. I'm talking about teaching people and demonstrating to people through your own actions that it's possible to come together and challenge decisions that are being made outside. It's the same kind of therapy you do with an individual addict that I was talking about. They all think they're being victimized by everything else. Well, there are ways of helping an individual, and in the same way, there are ways of helping neighborhoods, communities, countries, people, to show that it is possible to change things. We did that in the 60s. That's the great legacy of the 60s. It's not the individual battles that were won. It's the idea that you can take a stand when the papers are all telling you one thing, the churches are all telling you one thing, the government's all telling you one thing, the generals are all telling you one thing, and the bosses are all telling you one thing. And you can take a stand, be it against the war, be it against segregation in the South, and you can win. Now, when I was educated in the 50s, the gospel was that you could not fight City Hall, you could not win. And slowly we're kind of slipping back. But of course, people in their mind, even if they don't know all that went on in that era, they know that something happened, and generally it was kind of young people. They did make a stand. And
isn't challenging Lyndon Johnson a bit different than challenging Ronald Reagan? I mean, this group is a little more tight, a little more professional.
A little more sophisticated in their use of the communication media.
They've had 20 years to practice now.
They had 20 years of practice. Hey, the reason I came from the underground was because I had a good story to tell. Okay? Mm-hmm. Fugitive risked his neck, risked his freedom to save a river. I mean, I'm Jewish, you know. I come from a city, I don't know, a goddamn bathtub from a river, you know. Mm-hmm. The last Jew that knew anything about water was Noah, you know. So here, but I knew what was right and wrong. I have a sense of what is right and wrong, which if I understand Judaism, that's that was the way of life is about. When you feel something is wrong, when you see it's wrong, and you have the tools, the capabilities to change the situation, make it more just. If you don't do that, you're going to start to die inside. So I sat there and I read the reports of the Army Corps of Engineers coming, and they're going to dynamite this island and that, and they're going to destroy the river and destroy all the fish and the birds and everything and destroy all these communities. And here the Army public relations experts come in and tell the people this is really terrific for you. And the people are there confused and isolated because you don't have to be black, you don't have to be young, you don't have to be a woman to feel that you're separated from society. These were real Americans, WASPs, conservatives in upstate New York. You can't get more American. They felt hopeless. They felt it was inevitable. You can't stop them. Now, I knew I could change the situation. I worked for 3.5 years under very extraordinary and difficult circumstances, and we had a historic battle. We beat the Army Corps of Engineers. We won the battle. We're not, river wars go on. You know, everybody's fighting for rivers, and our committee, Save the River Committee, will now possibly, hopefully, be there as long as the river. It will
That
challenge an
still
engineering
exists.
mentality. The people have a whole different idea, and of course they, you know,
They've been changed
They
for a positive, permanent way. In a positive, permanent way. They're
There's
going to
enough.
stay that way.
I wouldn't have come out if we hadn't won the battle. I wanted to come out because I look around and I see people saying, well, there's a lot of apathy, you know, things are different now. Bullshit. There was a lot of apathy in the 60s. Most college students were majoring in engineering and business administration. There were only 5,000 people that went to Chicago to demonstrate outside the convention hall. You know, it wasn't my generation that changed things. There was the same amount of apathy. There was apathy 100,000 years ago. That's part of the challenge, Axel. That's part of the joy of changing apathy to an activist situation.
I keep getting the feeling that the whole trip of telling us that there's apathy, of harping on the apathy, is there to make that so, is a way of making it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
If you came to me college campus, you would not sense that the campus was apathetic, actually.
I want to ask you about coming out when you came out from the underground.
It would be very hard for any. It would be very hard for any, let's see, mainstream reporter to digest the fact that the young people, that the crowds that I speak to on campuses are twice the size now as they were in the 60s.
I want to ask you about turning yourself
fact.
in, coming out. That's a very interesting fact. I would have probably doubted that myself, having known the disco crowd.
The mythology of a fugitive who fights to save a river has touched something in people regardless of politics, so it's opened up a whole possibility. Most
You
of
think
the
that's
college
what brings them out
students
to
think
see
I'm
you?
an environmentalist. They don't know the 60s. They don't
You
even
really
know me
think
about. No, they don't.
Really?
Well,
That's interesting, because when I told
America
people,
buries
when I
its
said to people
past.
you were
It
going to be on
buries
the
its
show,
past. If it's a radical past, it buries it very rapidly.
It's
If
very
it's a radical past involved in a losing war,
that's funny
Jesus,
because
you know,
when I
people don't like
mentioned-
to go around talking about losses.
when I mentioned you were going to be on the show, the big thing was Abbie Hoffman, that whole thing of the Yippies back. And it's very funny to say that that's different.
This is cable TV. You know, everybody. You know, they get their moral philosophy from the Soho News or, you know, a Rolling Stone or something. It's hip. This is a hip thing, cable TV. You know, and it's a hip crowd, and so the hip crowd is going to relate to my hip.
Your ex-hipness or
hippiness.
yipness or whatever it was. I want to
yeah.
ask you about the you coming in at the time you did, coming out of.
To me,
you know,
it's kind
being
of a boring
fugitive.
subject. I only even discuss it because I have so many manners.
Well, the only thing that I thought about was
so many manners,
if
but
you
it's
had
boring.
waited, if you had waited,
The
till
future is
Brinks-
much more interesting than the past.
If you had waited till the Brinks thing, you probably would have been investigated even heavier. If you'd waited till been caught up in that whole weather.
Coming out
nonsense,
after that incident
would have really caused the.
They gave the underground a bad name, frankly. Yeah, it would have been a little more difficult legally, and I
at least gone to grand jury of some sort.
I you know, those are all iffy questions. I came out because of the story and the battle that was won. If you'd see me during that period on any kind of talk show, the guest had to say I came out to promote a book.
Oh, absolutely! Everybody said you had a book.
Everyone. Well, I did have a book.
Yeah.
I have a book coming out in 3 months. I should mention it. You know, the publishers.
Well,
Chintzy.
let's do that here
Chintzy,
now. We'll talk about that.
They don't
Came
afford
here to
ads.
plug a book.
Writers go on shows to plug book. I've always got a book coming out. I am a writer. That's one of the things I do.
Then you better have a book coming out.
But the object on all those shows is to prove that I'm as corrupt as every other goddamn guest they have on. That's the only object the talk show host has. It's nothing to gain information. You watch every single one. You watch every single one.
Sure, everybody comes on to find out.
They have to prove you're corrupt. In fact, if the media portrays me as an eccentric millionaire, that's very strange for someone who owns no property, no stocks, bonds, investments, nothing of any material value that you couldn't stick in 2 suitcases, and doesn't particularly give a fuck.
And they portray
That's
you as
that's very kind of threatening, especially in the hip money greed grab thing that's on right now today.
What about the future? What is
So therefore, I'm portrayed as an eccentric
You're going to do a
millionaire.
cable show? You're going to get a cable TV show?
Am I going to
Tell
do a
everybody
show? Well,
tell everybody what should be on cable?
I have problems with the hip language. I have problems with the form of cable TV. I'm totally disgusted with it in terms of posing as being an alternative. I'm really disappointed, in fact. I can't think of anything that's going on in the society that disappoints me more than cable TV, because
I think it's going to take a while to come up with an
I don't think
alternative to anything. It
Huh?
takes a while to develop an alternative. I think
it takes a while, huh?
Growing
it's
up.
right at the it's right at the onset where the crucial decisions get made, and if the alternative is more tips on how to make money, and tits and ass, and sports, and cooking recipes, and religious shows, and talking heads about gossip, I want to know. I want to know what's different.
So what do you put on?
Socialism.
Socialism.
Socialism. Why is that so weird to you?
It's not weird to me. It's not weird to me at all.
I don't care how artsy-fartsy you get.
Yeah.
I don't particularly care at this stage in my life or in my thinking. I don't think it adds anything to the discourse of ideas and things to say we have great freedom because we can paint any kind of pictures we want in a certain sense. I don't even think we have that. I'm not concerned with form. I'm not concerned with all the fancy developments in technology. I want to know content for a change. I want to know what the fuck are we talking about. And
You don't see that on anything coming through that way. You don't see that coming out on cable or in any really alternative media.
Well,
there was no.
I was I see CBS, Westinghouse, Gulf Western, Warner's Communication Corporations. These are not conglomerates that are particularly interested in allowing a philosophy that is anti-corporate, that challenges very basic ideas like economic systems.
Well,
they're not interested in allowing those particular kinds of viewpoints. I mean, the only reason I am allowed on mainstream TV, some talk shows, and it's, by the way, it's been far less, as I pointed out in my last, but it's far less than most people think, because I'm not an actor complaining about how hard it is to get up at 5:30 in the morning and put on makeup. I mean, so it's different. So it's in a way kind of shocking. But the only reason I am allowed is because I'm entertaining. It's all entertaining because I've developed certain communication techniques where I know how to blend it in certain kind of ways, how to attract people's attention. Every Jewish, firstborn male Jewish kid knows how to do that from birth. I mean, all the parents are sitting around the bed, they're waiting, let's do something, Abbie, do it for them, so I know how to do it. That's no trick.
That's funny, because Mayor Kahane was on here, he knew how to do it too. Rabbi Kahane knew exactly how to do that. It's very funny.
Maybe
he had
does. I mean, there are genetic advantages, that there are those kind of talents. But talent to me is a bore. It really is a boring thing. Talent.
That's funny, 'cause
it's
you
just sort
seem
of
to be
given.
a
It doesn't involve. It takes away from the sweat and the struggle of creativity.
But you seem to be a talented, creative person. I mean, it's funny that you should say that. I mean,
and modest.
And modest.
Yeah, no doubt. No, there's no doubt in my mind, or most anybody that knows me, that I can walk to Madison Ave and go up to an advertising company and have all the toys I want to play with,